Hey, folks, this is Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson with another episode of Tennessee Today. Before I get in today's episode, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Would you please like or subscribe to today's episode? It really helps with our content development. It also helps get out the word about the podcast and draws listeners in. And I think the more listeners that we're able to draw into the podcast, the more people can be informed about what's going on, not only in Hamilton County, but really all across the state of Tennessee. So I appreciate if you'd do me that favor. Today we're going to talk about the history of the Republican Party in Tennessee, because in today's edition of the Chattanooga Times News Free Press, there's a great article about people who are moving to Tennessee. And interestingly enough, most of those people, or many of those people, are moving from California. And of course, to a person here locally, to think that people from California are invading the state of Tennessee, there is the panic that they may be bringing their left-wing way of thinking to our great state. But in reality, what the data shows is that most of those people are actually align themselves with the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, if you look at the article about in 2024, the Times News Free Press again did an article about the voting patterns of people who were moving here from California, and 75% of those, 3/4, voted in Republican primaries. So people are leaving California and other states. I'm sure there are economic reasons for it, and where would you rather live than in the great state of Tennessee? I've lived here all my life. But they're moving here also for political reasons because, as many people have said, Tennessee is one of the most conservative states in the nation, and also ranks as one of the freest states in the nation, along with our sister states like Alabama and Florida and Texas. So it's a great place to live, both economically and politically. But because we have a lot of people moving to our state now, they may not know the political dynamics that have occurred over the course of Tennessee's history. Most people moving here now would see Tennessee as a red state, and obviously it is. It's a deeply red state. We just went through a redistricting process, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I think it's important to understand how we got to where we are as a state politically. A lot of people that are new to our state don't realize that Tennessee has not always been a Republican state. As a matter of fact, for 150 years, the Democrat Party controlled both the state Senate and the state House. Now, I was elected to the Tennessee Senate in 2006, and I had the opportunity to cast the vote for, at that time, Senator Ron Ramsey, who became the first Senate Speaker that was a Republican since 1869. So people who have moved to the state recently don't realize the history that the state has as a democratically controlled state. In 2010 was the first time in Tennessee state history that the Republicans controlled both the House of Representatives, the Senate, and we controlled the governor's office as well. So for the first time in history, about 15 years ago, the state of Tennessee had Republican chambers in the legislature as well as a Republican governor. Now, of course, since then, we've been on this incredible run with Republicans winning elections, both at the state level and local level, and within our federal delegation, the national level as well. But it's easy to forget that getting to a majority has been a real big fight for Republicans all across the state. For those who are interested in the history, the first Republican really nationally to represent the state of Tennessee was Howard Baker. Howard Baker was elected in the early 70s and was a very prominent Republican figure, but he was in a minority for years. Matter of fact, people don't realize that actually the United States Congress was controlled by Democrats for decades. before Republicans started breaking through in the late 60s and in the 70s. And of course, really, the high water mark came in 1994 when you had the Republican tsunami that took over Congress, led by a person who's actually been a guest on this podcast, Newt Gingrich. So if you think about the Republican Party in Tennessee, our role in governing the state has been relatively short, approximately around 15 years. As a matter of fact, Bill Haslam was governor from 2010 to 2016. Now we've had Bill Lee governor from 2016, and he will finish out at the end of this year. That's the first time in Tennessee's history that you've had two Republican governors consecutively govern across the state. So I say all that because folks who are moving here may believe that Tennessee's always been this conservative, always have been a Republican state, and it really haven't. And the danger there is that Republican voters get kind of lazy because they think, well, it's a Republican state, it's always going to be a Republican state, and they don't show up to vote. And that's exactly how the Democrat Party, not only were their policies just not consistent and did not align with Tennesseans, but they got lazy and they quit working hard during elections. They quit working hard at getting out the vote and those kind of things. And because of that, it gave a door, an opportunity for Republicans like myself to walk through and capitalize on the fact that they thought that just because the state had been Democrat for 150 years, it would continue to be Democratic for 150 years. Republicans don't need to make that same mistake. So this is my sort of get out the vote call to every citizen, because we have a duty as U.S. citizens, as citizens of the state of Tennessee, we have a duty and responsibility to vote. But particularly if you align with the Republican Party, it's really important that you get out and vote as well. So Tennessee, interestingly, a lot of states, particularly for people who have come here from other states, don't realize Tennessee only has 3 statewide elected officials, which when you think about it, if you come from a place like Texas, they elect everybody statewide. Our 2 United States senators are elected statewide. They're both Republicans, Marsha Blackburn and Bill Hagerty. And our governor is elected statewide. Those are the only 3 positions in government in the state of Tennessee that have statewide elections. Everything else is broken up by various districts. That's very unique to Tennessee's form of government. It also is a bellwether of how other elections across the state are going to go. So when you have Republicans representing you at the national level, there's a pretty good correlation to Republicans representing you at the local level. When you have the governor as a Republican representing you at the state level, it's a pretty good indicator that you're going to have majority of cases Republicans representing you at the local level, which is exactly how it plays out here in Tennessee. Democrats have certain strongholds across the state, certainly in the Nashville and the larger cities, Nashville, Memphis areas where the Democrat Party tends to have most of its strength. Again, for people who are new to our state, East Tennessee, where I sit and spend all of my time, born, raised, and I'll be buried here, East Tennessee has always been where the Republicans have lived across the state. That goes all the way back to the Civil War era. And you had a lot of what would be termed Union sympathizers that lived in the eastern part of our state, which is one of the reasons why when Sherman came through, he didn't burn Chattanooga the way he burned Atlanta, was because they had Union sympathizers here. They also needed our rail line in order to get into the Deep South. So Republicans have always been a part of the eastern part of the state. It's only been in the past few decades that we have made progress all the way into middle and now all the way out into West Tennessee. Which brings me to a discussion that's a really hot topic all across the state, and that is redistricting and how it works. Because I think it's important, first of all, you have to understand the history of the state. So remember, for 150 years, the Democrat Party drew all of the lines for party redistricting. Normally, that occurs every 10 years when we do a census. You redraw the lines, and Democrats drew those lines, again, as I told you, for 150 years. Since 2010, the first time in Tennessee's history, the Republicans had the majority and the Republicans had the ability to draw the lines for our U.S. congressional districts as well as our state legislative and state Senate districts. We did that in 2010. We also did it again in 2020. Now, what people don't necessarily understand about redistricting is it is a political process. The most recent Supreme Court decision, Louisiana versus Calais, made it very clear that drawing districts, gerrymandering is a political process. And because it's political, when the Democrats controlled the state for 150 years, they drew districts that favored the Democrat Party. That's the process. Now that Republicans have controlled the legislature for the past couple of decades, Republicans draw districts that represent the Republican Party. The objective of Republicans is to elect Republicans. The objective of Democrats is to elect Democrats. And we do that by the way we draw districts. While we are doing that, the one fundamental thing that's required is the populations have to match. So, for example, if you're in and I'll use round numbers here, but a congressional district is 750,000 people, 780,000 people, whatever the number is, it has to be that precise number. So some of these funny lines that you see is because you have to get that exact population number for your congressional district. In similar way, when we draw local districts or we draw state legislative districts, there are population parameters that we have to meet. So some of the funny lines that you see are simply because we're trying to get to the correct population so that everyone is equally represented in terms of their vote. Recently, the governor called us into special session in order to draw new congressional lines because it was felt with the decision of Louisiana versus Calais, it was felt that Tennessee had not always drawn their lines based on just political advantage, that there were other factors that the state took into place when we were drawing those lines. One of those factors being race, which is called majority-minority districts. The Calais decision said that's not how you draw districts. You draw districts based on political ideology. So the legislature came back into special session and drew all of our districts, all 9 of them. While there has been focus on West Tennessee, people forget that we redrew all 9 congressional districts. All of them changed to some degree. And we made the West Tennessee district, which is District 9, much more of a Republican competitive district for us because it's a political process. Republicans want to elect Republicans. Republicans are going to draw districts that try to elect Republicans. And that's what the map demonstrates. Now, because it's a change and because you have an incumbent that was affected by that, it obviously stirred up a lot of attention, a lot of different accusations about why we drew the map the way we did. But at the end of the day, Republicans draw maps to elect Republicans, and the party in majority, just as in other states where the Democrats have a majority, they draw districts that try to elect Democrats. So our drawing of that district really reflects the state's ever-increasing Republican ideology, and it ties in well with this migration of people coming from California who are moving here because Tennessee is a more conservative state, and those people that are moving here tend to vote, according to the Times News Free Press, tend to vote for Republicans. So it just makes sense that you would draw maps that represent Republicans. Now, you're going to hear that, the state, we always get sued when we draw maps. As a matter of fact, when the Democrats were drawing maps, the Republicans would sue the Democrats and say, hey, this is unfair. Well, if you're in the minority party, everything's unfair. That's one of the hard parts about being in the minority is that you feel like you get treated unfairly. And I can say that because I served in the minority party when I was in the Tennessee House of Representatives. And when I was in the Tennessee House of Representatives, the minority party only got what the majority party decided they would give to us. Well, now that the shoe is on the other foot, it doesn't feel good. I get it. It feels unfair. That's the political process. It's up to Democrats to try and work within the minority basis in order to try and get things accomplished. In order to do that, you got to work with Republicans, because at the end of the day, you don't have enough votes to get anything done, and the Republicans in Tennessee always have enough vote to get everything done. That carries into the redistricting process. The majority party gets to decide what the maps look like. Now, everybody sues when they draw the maps because they claim somehow somebody somewhere is getting treated unfairly. Again, as I said, when the Democrats drew the maps, the Republicans sued. When the Republicans draw the maps, the Democrats sue. At the end of the day, I believe that the maps that we've drawn, from a legal perspective, the courts will look at and say these are drawn for political purposes. They meet the proper population requirements. They are fair and legal under the way our laws guide the redistricting process. You know, you can say it's gerrymandering. I could argue with you and say, the problem with that argument is that for 150 years, the Democrats gerrymandered the maps. Perhaps maybe we're ungerrymandering the maps now that we've been in charge and have had the ability to draw the districts. Okay, so now can we talk personally with each other here? Because it's a really big deal about how redistricting works and why it's important, but also when you are a heavily dominated Republican state, or in some other state, a heavily dominated Democrat state. People who may not actually fully align with Republican principles, Republican ideology, will realize that in a certain area, there is no way they can get elected. It's impossible for them to get elected. There are just too many Republicans living in that district. So what they will do is they will pretend to be Republicans. They will use the Republican brand. Now, look, both parties have a brand, right? And both parties sell their brand, and both parties' brand is incredibly invaluable to a candidate. So someone who perhaps doesn't necessarily align with the Republican Party or with Republican principles or a conservative mindset will often use that brand to get elected and then not necessarily represent that brand once they get in office. Now, there are various degrees of this, and both parties over time have tried to ensure that people who carry the Republican brand are Republicans. People who carry the Democrat brand are Democrats. You'll remember on an earlier session we talked with Gail Green, who was the Hamilton County GOP chairperson, and we talked a little bit about this, about how parties have particularly parties that are dominated by one party in the state have to vet candidates more carefully than they did when they're not in a majority position, or when they're not, so they don't dominate the state the way Republicans do in Tennessee. So now the Republican Party in Tennessee has a much stricter vetting process, that everyone who just wants to claim to be a Republican doesn't necessarily get to use the brand. I'll give you a perfect example. It happened on the local level. You had an individual who was wanting to run for a local seat. And when the party reviewed that individual's voting record, it did not match with the criteria that the party requires for someone to be able to use the Republican brand. And that individual was not allowed to run in a primary using a Republican brand because they really didn't fit what the definition in Tennessee was as a Republican. Now, some people might look at that and say, well, that's kind of harsh. But again, when you have districts where a certain brand, Republican or Democrat, is all that can be elected because of the ideology, people will try and steal the brand and use it to their political advantage and get elected to office, and then move an agenda that does not align with the parties, and the party tries to protect against that. One of the discussion that has not been concluded yet that's happening in the state of Tennessee is, should we require party registration? Some states do, where you go and when you're going to vote, you say, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. There's a lot of debate back and forth between both parties about whether that's a good idea or bad idea. Registering for a party, actually, even in our current law where we have what is termed, I think, open registration, people have to declare that they align with the particular party when they go and vote in a primary. People get confused about the difference between primaries and general elections. Primaries are really designed for each party to select their own candidates. It's not a general election where everybody's supposed to vote. If you're an independent or you don't really have any kind of party affiliation, you're really not supposed to participate in primaries, because primaries is where the party people pick who their candidate's going to be. Registration helps with that. And as the state becomes more and more one-party dominated, they have to start looking at, is party registration something that we should require of individuals? And we're going through that debate in Tennessee right now. But it's really important to know that it's not uncommon for people to try and use a brand in order to advance their political career. So again, if you go back to the article that was in today's paper, and by the way, today is Tuesday, May 27th, for those of you who might want to look and find the article. If you go back and you look at the article, all of a sudden you start going, well, wait a minute, all this political conversation that's going on, it actually is aligning with the people that are moving here. And they're moving here because Tennessee's political values are aligning with their values. And oh, by the way, when I moved there from California, I get a much better return on the investment on the money that I make, because property values or property costs are less. The cost of living in Tennessee is significantly less. So and of course, who can complain about the environment that we live in here in particularly East Tennessee, where you have an urban area and then within 15 minutes you can be hiking in the Smoky Mountains. I mean, it's an amazing place to live. So when you add that and you add on top of that a political alignment, it makes sense why everybody would want to live here. Of course, as we've talked about in other episodes, that creates growth problems for us, but that's for us to talk about again on another day. I do think it's important for people to understand that the politics of today in Tennessee are significantly different than the politics of yesterday. You have gubernatorial candidates who are running now who are, some of which are saying, I want to make Tennessee even more conservative, even more Republican, which again aligns with the redistricting that we just completed a couple of weeks ago. We will go through an election process here in the next few weeks for the primaries, and then in November we'll have a general election, and the people will decide how they want their government to be structured, whether it be a Republican ideology, a Democrat ideology, or whatever else ideology it might be. For now, the redistricting that we've done, I think, meets the standard that the courts would require of us. Oh, and by the way, how did I forget this? Maybe one of the key drivers of people moving to our state is that Tennessee is a no income tax state. And particularly if you're a high income person, which I wish I was, but I'm not. But if you're a high income person, where would you rather be? I mean, you can swap the income tax level for California for Tennessee. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then if you're conservative on top of that, that just fits right in with who you are as an individual. So we welcome our conservative Republican California friends here in our great state. Now, I'm saying all this as we start looking to election season. So it's May 27th. Early voting will start maybe the first or second week of July here in Tennessee for primaries. Of course, now our local people, it will be their general election. And then we'll have our primary in August, and then, of course, we'll have the general election in November. It is really important for Tennesseans, particularly really important for Republicans in Tennessee to get out and vote. Voting, even if you disagree with the policies of Tennessee, you can express your disagreement at the ballot box. That's the way our process is supposed to work. If you are a Republican and you want to continue to see Tennessee walk down this conservative Republican path, then it's really important you get out and express your views through the ballot box. There is nothing more important in election season than getting folks out and getting them to vote. It also will set up for what our next legislative session looks like. As Republicans, we will continue to budget conservatively, invest in infrastructure and in education and in healthcare in ways that make sense, in ways that create more opportunity for Tennesseans, not only from an employment perspective, but from an educational perspective. We will continue to look at ways we can enhance public safety through investments in law enforcement, through investments in other types of public safety strategies like judicial reform and those kind of things that we've been heavy at over the past several years. Most importantly, locally, we'll focus on community and economic development, being sure that we're not only just bringing new jobs here, but we're trying to bring in jobs that pay significant wages. People don't realize, particularly if you're from Tennessee like me, born and raised, you just don't pay attention to some of these things. Over the past 10 years, we have consistently seen the wage per hour for Tennesseans go up and up and up. That has a really good effect on our economy. As a sales tax-based economy, the more money we keep in our citizens' pockets, the more money they are able to spend, and thus that's how they fund the different things that we do in government. So it's really important, and it's one reason why we're a non-income tax state, is that we believe that the people who can make the best choices about how to spend their money are the people who make the money. So we try to leave it in your pocket so you can spend it the way you think it best fits your individual or family needs. Republicans are going to stay on that trend. I would say we're on a fantastic trend, and we need to continue to keep Republicans in office. Going all the way back now to the beginning, we have not always been a Republican state. For 150 years, the Democrat Party controlled the House and the Senate, and in most years controlled the governor's office as well as Tennessee's Supreme Court. In the past 15, 20 years, we've seen that change. In the past 15 or 20 years, we have seen Tennessee move up economically, move up culturally, move up educationally. And I would argue it's because of the leadership that we've put in office across the state. First, let me thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. It is an honor to share information with people, and I hope you learned something from today and other podcasts that I've done. If you have, I would appreciate it if you would share, like, or subscribe to today's podcast. It helps us get out the word. It also helps us improve the podcast. And feel free to make comments. Positive are appreciated, but we'll take criticism as well, because this show intends to inform and educate citizens all across the state of Tennessee, but particularly here in Hamilton County. I'll see you next time. This has been Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson with another episode of Tennessee Today.